Hey y'all, it's Tina with Viva Beat Music, and today's video is all about the glorious reverb. Everyone loves reverb, myself included. But why is it so popular and why do we use it in music? And can't we just do without it? Maybe you already use reverb in your tracks, but you don't know which types you should be choosing, which settings, how much to use. I mean, there's so many knobs, right? Like what even is pre-delay and decay, right? Maybe all you know is that it sounds good and it's in your track for that reason. If that's you, that's completely fine, because guess what? That was me. And that's why I wanted to do this video today, so I could completely dissect what reverb is and how we can use it in our tracks. So let's dive into the topic, shall we? Whether we think about it or not, reverb exists all around us and in every space we're in. A crowded shopping mall, a big church, your bathroom. I mean, we all love how we sound in the shower, right? All these spaces have reverb in them and their own unique characteristics. What you are actually hearing are the reflections of sound waves bouncing around and hitting different surfaces. And depending on what material those surfaces are made out of, like wood, glass, tile, they will all sound different. Without even thinking, our brain automatically associates different spaces depending on their reverb characteristics. So why do we use reverb in music? We use it because it helps place a track, such as an acoustic guitar or a vocal, in a space that sounds more natural and pleasing to our ears. So let's look at how to set up a reverb. Whenever possible, always put the reverbs on their own aux or bus tracks. This will give you a greater amount of control and will allow you to use the same reverb for multiple tracks, which also helps with not using too much computer processing. These types of plugins tend to take up a lot of CPU power. Now that we have our aux or bus track created, I'm going to go ahead and open up a reverb plugin. And it's just a generic reverb plugin here in Logic Pro. Once we have that opened up, you'll notice that there's a dry and a wet setting. We're going to go ahead and put the wet signal all the way up or to 100%. This means that only the reverb sound will be going out. Next, we will use the send knob to send some of the track signal to the reverb without affecting the original track. This is what sends are for. We will turn the knob until enough of the dry signal is coming through or until the reverb sound is to your liking. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit here until we hear it enough in the reverb. And as you can hear, the guitar is starting to come through and it's starting to sound like it's in its own space. Now let's take a look at this basic reverb plugin. There are three main settings to keep in mind when it comes to reverb, and the first is the type of reverb we want. There are different spaces that you'll notice in reverb, such as halls, plates, springs, rooms, larger reverbs like chambers. These are all spaces that have their own unique characteristics and tones. So keep this in mind when choosing the type of reverb you want to use. What space are you wanting your instrument to be in? What tone are you trying to create? This will help with choosing the type of reverb to use. Halls, rooms, and chamber reverbs will sound the most natural because they are supposed to emulate those actual spaces. While on the other hand, you have plates and spring reverbs that are going to sound artificial because they do not resemble a particular space and they're generally brighter in sound because of that. So moving on to the pre-delay. The shorter the pre-delay, the more of the attack of the source will come through and the more the reverb will kind of take a backseat. This is important for things like vocals, where we want that to remain clear and upfront throughout the track. The longer the pre-delay, the more of the space you will hear and the less upfront a source will be. You might want this for things like background vocals, ambient guitars, or strings, and things that don't really need to be upfront in a mix. Let's go ahead and look at what pre-delay does to affect the sound of the reverb when we have a shorter length of time and when we have a longer length of time. Right now I have it set to a short pre-delay, 11 milliseconds. Let's check out how that sounds. So if you notice with the shorter amount of pre-delay, the guitar is going to stay more up front and the reverb is more in the back end of the sound. But when I increase the pre-delay, it's taking longer for that reverb to start. So there's going to be a lot more reflections going on in the space that it's in. So this can cause things to get muddy when you have the pre-delay set too high, but it can be a good thing when you're working with things that are trying to sit in the back of the mix, like strings or background vocals, things like that don't need to be the forefront of what's going on in the mix. Decay is the next parameter that you're going to want to look at. This can also be called length or time. This determines how long the reverb effect is going to last and die out. The longer the decay, the bigger the reverb space is going to sound. The shorter the decay, the smaller the reverb space is going to sound. So let's take a look here at what the decay time does in terms of increasing or decreasing the size of that reverb. So if you notice here, I have the decay time set to a very short reverb time. So when it's shorter in length like this, it's going to sound like the space is a lot smaller. So let's take a listen. So it kind of sounds like the guitar is in its own specific room. Now if I increase that decay time, so as you can see, when I increased that decay time, it took a lot longer for that reverb tail to trail off, and it made the space seem a lot larger than what it was before. This is what the decay time does. It either makes the space smaller or it makes the space bigger. I will go over techniques on using reverb on different things like drums, guitar, and vocals in future videos, but for now, these are the 3 main parameters to understand when it comes to reverb. Hopefully that wasn't too much info, and if it was, I hope that it was helpful info. As you can see, it helps to know how to use reverb in your tracks and why it is such a great effect to use. Reverb is your friend, and it's going to help take your tracks to the next level by adding the depth and the dimension that it needs. And on that note, if you haven't quite seen the last video or you need help with another helpful tool that will make a big difference in your tracks, I've included my free quick start guide to compression in the video description below. Compression is another great tool when used wisely, and I know that it can be a tricky subject, so that's why I created a whole guide just dedicated to compression to break it down and dissect it for you. And I've also included a cheat sheet at the very end that will make using compression a lot easier in your tracks. Feel free to download that. Like I mentioned, it's completely free. I just hope that it helps you take your music further. Thank you so much for watching, and feel free to let me know what videos you'd like to see in the future, or maybe some topics that you might be struggling with your music, and I will try my best to make videos and content geared towards those topics specifically. That's it for now. I hope to see you in the next video.